Welcome back to the Wise Divine Woman podcast, where I help you go from fed up to faith fueled, helping you to become the wise divine woman that you've been called to be. Today, I have Megan Edge from British Columbia, Canada. It's here for Canada. And it's so amazing to have someone on here. And today we're talking about, Megan on here to talk about heart-centered meditations, but also talk a little bit about her oracle cards that she made, which are heart-centered. And honestly, welcome to the show, Megan. I think it's very exciting. I always think it's fun to learn about these. And I have some more earth-centered oracle cards that I like to pull once in a while. And they're earth-centered rather. But what brought you on this journey of not only just being heart-centered in your focus and in your book, but in this journey that you're on with oracles and heart-centered meditations?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show, Dana. I'm really excited for our conversation today. And what a great question. As you were asking the question, I was thinking, well, really, what did it? Because I get asked that question a lot. When did you know you were a healer, or how did you know that you had these skills, or have you always been intuitive? The answer to those three questions is yes, yes, and yes. I've always known I was intuitive. I've always been a healer in one way or another, whether as a little kid picking worms up off the sidewalk after the rainstorm, or bringing home the bird with the broken wing. But what started me on this journey, the more heart-centered journey, I was looking for a new car after my car accident, which is part of what propelled me. The car accident is part of what propelled me onto this journey, this particular leg of it. And when I found the car of my dreams, because I had envisioned a red car, specifically a station wagon, and I found it. And when I went to the woman's house to test drive the car, there was a bumper sticker on the back of the car that said, "Trust your heart above all other voices." And there was something about that really hit my heart. And I started to wonder, am I trusting my heart? And from there unraveled what unraveled was my whole life. Because once I started to ask that question, what does my heart want? I realized that I wasn't listening to my heart. I was allowing myself to be very poorly treated in my marriage. I was allowing myself to be small and stay quiet, which is not who I am, but it's who I had become. And when my then husband and I were in marital counseling, the therapist asked me, she said, "Well, what does your heart want?" Which was a surprising thing to hear from her, especially on the heels of having found this bumper sticker. And I didn't have an answer for her at that moment. I actually didn't know. It had been such a long time since I had really tapped in and sat with what my heart wanted. And then when I did sit and tap into what my heart wanted, I didn't like what I heard. Right? I said, no, that can't be right. It can't be right that I'm unhappy in this marriage. It can't be right that all the things I've tried to do to make it work aren't working. It can't be right that I'm no longer supposed to be with this person, with our two little children and the life we've built with one another. I did not want to hear what my heart was telling me. But as you know, I'm sure once we start listening to our hearts, there's no going back to not listening to our hearts. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We have to follow it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like listening to Holy Spirit in the sense, if you're listening, you're disobeying, right? So it's really counterintuitive when you're not listening to yourself. And I think when we come of age, which I call the age of wisdom, the sense of not following our gut, let alone our heart's desire, like we may say that all the time, oh, our heart's desire, or those types of things, which is biblical sort of language that you hear often, but we don't do it, right? And we don't follow our gut. And these are all really things I find that have been instilled or miraculously put into the body that we don't pay attention to, right?
Right.
And because there's just so much noise going on. And I love, love, love how the car is red and the bumper sticker, and then your therapist even say that. I'm sure you were floored. You were just like flabbergasted. But yeah, wow, if that's not someone telling you something, then, it's a good thing that you listened, right?
Well, and you never hear someone say, I wish I hadn't listened to my intuition, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
Usually the opposite. I wish I had, I had
Yes.
that nudge to do this
Yeah.
thing and I didn't do it. And dang, I wish I had, and wherever that nudge comes from, it's not really relevant where it comes from. We all have our way of hearing and knowing. And then we have this beautiful thing called free will, which gives us the permission to not listen. But the consequence of not listening, the consequences of not really deeply honoring our innate knowing, they can be profound. And it can take many decades, sometimes lifetimes, for the person, not the soul. The soul's got most of it figured out. But when we come into the human form, there's a symbiotic relationship that's happening between us and the divine, however we perceive that to be. So we, the human, get to say yes or no. But eventually we're going to have to say yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're just patiently waiting up there. They're like, okay, come on, catch up.
And sometimes not so patiently because in my experience, I look at what I call the 3 levels of intuition. And the first level is our own wise self, because we are more brilliant than we give ourselves credit for much of the time. And we often give away our sovereignty and our power to other people when we ask them, what should I do? Rather than tuning in and listening to ourselves. When we listen to ourselves on a regular daily basis, we get used to that. We get confident in our own abilities to make wise choices for ourselves. So that's that first level of intuition and intuitive connecting to the divine. The second is where we're being a little obtuse. We're being a little stubborn. We know what we're supposed to do. We know what we came here to do, but for whatever reason, we're not. And so that's when who's ever around us, I call them our team. Some people call them angels, guides. Doesn't matter what we call them, they're there. They have permission at that point to maybe give us a little push, a little shove. And if we're still being really obtuse, which often we are, then the third level is when what I call the big guns get involved. And that's whomever. That's the divine, that's God, that's goddess. It's whomever you believe and know to be the energy that is helping you along this journey. And so that's when we have the wake-up calls. And those wake-up calls can come in a lot of different ways. For me, initially it was the car accident, because that took me out of commission and I wasn't able to be Wonder Woman anymore and do all the things that I was doing without questioning why I was doing all those things. It was when somebody was invited back into my life and I couldn't ignore what that felt like. I couldn't ignore what that was. I had gotten really good at ignoring every other red flag that was shoved in my face, but that was the one I couldn't ignore, and that's the one that cracked open my heart. And so while I had started to ask the question, what does my heart desire? And I was really meditating on listening and honoring my heart above all other voices, I was completely unprepared for where that was leading me. Right. And that's the genesis of the heart's journey, and the oracle cards, and my connection with nature, which is profound and very deep. I grew up in a foraging family. I've always been a nature girl. I said to the universe, please just show me a sign. Just give me a symbol, a sign that when I see it, I'll know. And I'm thinking it'll be a hummingbird or an eagle or, something really typical like that. And it turns out that the universe, the divine, has a lovely sense of humor. And suddenly I started seeing hearts everywhere.
Everywhere.
I saw them in clouds and in the burls of trees and painted on sidewalks and chalked into the sand, everywhere, like a floodgate of hearts open. So you can start to see the pattern of the way in which the universe or the divine was speaking to me. Mm-hmm. First it's the red car. Well, first it's the car accident, then it's the red car, then it's the bumper sticker, then it's me asking for that symbol. And all of that, I believe now, was preparing and exercising my heart to recognize the rug being pulled out from underneath me, right? Because I wouldn't have necessarily recognized that that's what needed to happen.
Right, right. And it's also preparing your heart for the what's bound to happen. And sometimes it does take all of those signs and symbols to be like, okay, you're not paying attention, like this, look again, right? So it is just all of this confirmation that you're on the right track and you're walking in the right step, and keep going, it's there for
Mm-hmm.
you. So it's wonderful confirmation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it feels to me like it's a divine language. Signs, symbols, and synchronicities is really a divine language. It's not how we normally speak to one another, and it's not how we normally walk through the world. But once we start asking for those signs, symbols, and synchronicities, or we look back on our lives and we realize that, oh, that happened there and there and there, and that's why I'm here, we can start to understand and learn that language and benefit from that, I believe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is this, we ourselves have to just have that willingness, right? We have to,
Yes.
you have to ask. That's the biggest thing. We have to step outside of ourselves, and we
Yeah.
have to ask.
Yes. Yeah. And that is really the first step for in so many cases and so many journeys, healing journeys. It's that first question of what can I do differently than what I am doing? Right?
Hmm.
How can I help myself? What does my heart need? What does my body need? That asking is what opens the floodgates of information to our own internal wisdom that we have. And then through that process we can learn to trust what we're hearing. And especially when we act on what we're hearing, then we have the confirmation of the validity of what we've heard in the first place.
Right.
Not always easy, though.
No.
No.
Not ever supposed to be easy, right? That it's always the road less traveled. That is
Yes.
so
Yeah, exactly.
amazing, amazing. So, in everything that you do with the meditations and such, what is the first step that we do take in understanding the meditations that we need for ourselves?
Well, the beautiful thing about meditation, at least in the way in which we embrace it in the West, it's very fluid, it's very organic. I believe almost anything can be a meditation. I know I can be doing the dishes and looking out my window at the sunrise or the sunset, and that is a form of meditation. I can be walking along the beach and noticing the way the waves are hitting the rocks, and that's a form of meditation. It's really anything we do that takes us out of our ordinary busy monkey minds and gives us a moment to simply stop and reflect and ask and listen to that still voice that's inside of us. And certainly there are meditation practices and meditation modalities that can take us really deep into some really significant types of meditation, but not everybody has an hour a day to do that, or they can't or not or aren't willing to set aside an hour a day to do that. I don't do that. I don't spend an hour a day specifically regimentedly doing meditation. I incorporate it into everything I do. So just before we got on our call, I was out in my garden and I was watering because we've had some dry days. And as I'm watering, I'm watching the water as it meets the soil. I'm thinking about the ways in which the roots are going to be really happy to have that water, and the way the plants are going to produce more beans and kale and lettuce and tomatoes for me. That's a connective form of meditation. And it's coming from my heart because I love my plants. I love that I get to grow my own food or some of my own food, you know? My
I think
approach,
it's, yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
my approach to anything, whether it's spirituality or it's meditation or it's healing, is what is the simplest, most direct way that we can connect with what it is that we need? And what's the most grounded way that we can do that as well? And so that's where I come from when I'm thinking about, that heart connection. Something as simple just throughout the day is just taking a moment and putting your hands over your heart and taking a breath. That's a heart connection. It's a 2-second meditation.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
where someone could start if they're not sure where to go.
Yeah, in what I teach or when I'm following up with clients or talking with clients, it's always that, all right, you need to put your hand on your heart, because it's not only just that you need to connect with yourself, that physical touch, but it is this holding the heart in place and in confirmation and in love,
Hmm.
that you step back. And I have to remind people sometimes, like, you have to sort of hand in your heart, hand in your belly, so that you're aware of your breath. But again, it's this step back out of yourself just for a brief moment, take a breath. And then, it's that, where are you at? What's going on? How am I perceiving this situation? Am I approaching it correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Take a breath and then step back into it again. But again, it's this reassurance of this self sort of hug to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and then being able to come back into a situation with more confidence, right? More love, more feeling. And again, it breaks that sometimes habit, sort of the repetitive pattern that we get ourselves into that keep us in this spiral.
Well, that's
And
exactly it. That's right.
yeah,
It disconnects us from our immediate unconscious emotional response to a situation. I think this was in the 80s when it became really popular to say to children, count to 10, before you get really
yeah,
angry, count to 10. Well, that
yeah,
applies to adults as well. And that's
it sure
essentially
does.
what we're doing. Count to
Yes.
10. I had to do
Can't
that this
imagine,
morning.
yeah, can't imagine saying that to my husband, but it would be valuable. Yeah, count to 10,
Oh,
please.
I have said it to my husband. Oh, there's certainly been times it's like, hang on, before you throw your phone down because you're frustrated with, whatever's happening,
Yeah,
just take a breath or go walk around the block, go
yeah,
outside,
yeah.
get out of here. You've got to break that sort of concentrated connection to that feeling that shows up. And it's not to say that a feeling of anger or frustration is a negative feeling. All feelings give us information. It's what we choose to do with those feelings. And most of the time, people aren't choosing, they're reacting, right? They're not responding, they're reacting. And they don't know that they can choose another way of being in
Hmm.
that situation. Right? So even though it shows up as an immediate response or immediate reaction, take that breath and step back. And you will be very glad that you've done that.
Yeah, exactly, right? In
Yeah.
any situation,
In any
honestly.
situation. That's right.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So tell me about the cards that you created. Like, there's lots of oracle cards in the world, and I think it's great. And there's so many, and I love the excitement of looking at each of them and what they mean and things. But the
Hmm.
heart-centered cards, like, what brought you? Because I guess you would have, in your in everything that you're that you believe and that you've encountered, and that you're being downloaded, and all the information that you've been given, you're like, there's nothing out here that serves that purpose, and that's where you created your own, right?
In a sense, and I had worked with oracle cards with clients and with myself and with friends ever since I had been a teenager, and I found my first. Actually, I started with rune stones. I found a book by Ralph L. Bloom, and he's the one who brought rune stones sort of back into the collective consciousness for people who were interested in that sort of thing. These divination tools, these meditation tools, and then I started finding tarot cards and oracle cards. I didn't know much about them when I was a teenager, but I was very curious about how these tools could help us on our way. And I know that there are people who are cautious around these sorts of things. And what I remind them of is that it's just a meditation tool. Right. It's no different than lighting a candle and looking at the candle. It's really no different than lighting frankincense and listening to Gregorian chanting. Whatever is going to help you move out of the busyness of your mind and the busyness of your day and take a moment to sit quietly with that breath that we were just talking about. So
Hmm.
there's nothing innately wrong with them at all. In fact, if anything, they're just a tool that helps you connect. So because I had been working with oracle cards as a tool in tarot with my clients for a long time as a counseling tool and a meditation tool, when I got the little nudge that I could take all of these beautiful hearts that I had been finding, that I had been taking photographs of, so that I would have them close to me to remind myself to follow my heart above all other voices. When I got the nudge that I should put these onto oracle cards, my first response was, why? There are so many decks of oracle cards in the world. There are tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands now. Who needs mine? Who needs my deck? And also, what if they don't work? I
Yeah,
actually had
yeah.
that. I had that thought. What if they don't work? But as you well know, Dana, when we get those ideas and they're meant to be, you don't really have a lot of choice. I mean, you do, of course, but it's going to keep coming around. It's going to keep coming around. And so through a series of of those gentle reminders, especially when clients and friends said, after seeing some of my photographs, that they wanted me to make an oracle card deck. I thought, right, who am I not to do this if this is what people are asking for? And so I took all the photographs. So here's a beautiful one here. This is called Heartfelt. And
And
this is,
that's it in felt?
well, no, it's about how the heart feels. I'll
Oh,
read
okay, okay.
I'll read the other side in a moment. But what this is a particular kind of algae that grows on rocks in the ocean. It can also sometimes be made by petrol, gasoline, and oil that collects on the surface and then washes up against the rocks. And inevitably, they form these little heart shapes, which is so beautiful,
Interesting. Yeah.
right? And so Heartfelt says, hang on, there we go. Just when you least expect it, love finds you. Become so involved in your own well-being that it becomes an inspiration to others. They will shine in your brightness and the world will become a better place. Love is infectious. So it's a reminder that when we love ourselves up first, then we have so much left over to
Right.
love other people. Right.
Right.
And it's so that it's that connecting to our own self-love. What does that feel like to be in a place of self-love? Every card in here, the story on the back is one of my stories of what I was going through as I was coming out of that 23-year marriage and relationship with these two little children. And as I said to the universe, show me a sign, And so each time I saw one of these hearts in nature, there was a connection there for me. This is another one. This is called Wounded Heart Healed. And what you're looking at is an arbutus bark. And the arbutus tree is a native tree to the west coast of Canada and slightly south of us as well, and then over in Spain and Portugal. But those are the only places on the planet where it grows. It's called a madrona tree as well. And the bark is beautiful and smooth. It feels like skin. It's very, very sensual. And people often carve into it because they can, because it's a flat surface and people like being creative or whatever they're doing. And what the tree does is it then builds bark over where it has been carved in and it leaves a scar. And that's what this is. This is a little heart, and then someone wrote an S next to it. So I guess the message was hearts. And when I saw it, I felt this. I said, creatively express your heart wounds as a way to healing. In sharing your story, you connect to others and create beauty. Find the beauty in your wounding. Right?
That's beautiful.
None of
Yes.
us are broken, right?
And completely reflects in the picture because it is a wound that the tree naturally healed, creating the scar tissue, right? Which is amazing. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And so that's where it started. It started with the hearts being shown to me and me deciding I was going to take photographs of them for myself. And then when I stepped out of that marriage and my healing work became my sole income and I was the sole provider, I had to really step into that work that I was doing. And someone said, you've got to get out on Facebook. And I was like, I don't want to be on Facebook. No, 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 get yourself on Facebook and share the hearts. And from there, this whole community grew of people who love finding hearts, and people were sharing them back and forth. And I still get people from around the world sending me these hearts that they've found because it's so profound for them to make that heart connection. And so once I created the deck of cards, then I created a whole toolkit. And so in the box set, which looks like this, it comes in this beautiful hardcover. You get the workbook that teaches you about oracle cards as a meditation tool. I share my personal story in there as well. I would say all of the oracle cards I've ever worked with, the authors haven't necessarily shared the why of creating the deck that they've put out into the world or that personal piece of it. And for me, it was really important to have that there. It was terrifying, but also important that when people worked with these cards, they understood that there was a real person and a real person's story and experience behind the cards or as part of the creation of the cards. And I work with story. I work with people's personal stories as part of the healing journey when I work with my clients. And so I felt I had to walk my talk. I had to share it as well.
Yep. Yeah,
And then
that's
you get a
exactly it.
journal,
And
you get a whole
and
bunch of things.
it's part of that, right? And it's the
Mhm.
sharing of the wisdom, as you just said in that. Again, it is the sharing of the wisdom. It's the sharing of the story that allow people to reflect and share that emotion with you, and also encourage them that they're not alone in the journey,
Yeah.
that they're not alone in feeling the way that they feel, or that they must be the only person in the world who's gone through a divorce, or, has experienced the different things. And they may have other signs and symbols that are apparent to them always. But it's again this, they're not strange in seeing things, number one, because
Yes.
we need to know that it's the universe speaks to us always.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that number two, that they're not alone. And it's in creating, and that's why the Facebook community probably is doing so well and flourished, because everyone's in the same, state. And, like, in a lot of ways, COVID separated, but COVID brought people together in community much more than they would have if that hadn't have happened. And so it's again this love-centered, heart-centered community that people are desperate for, and then beautifully written how to reflect in that in a meditation. How do people use the cards?
So there's a lot of different ways that we could work with oracle cards and tarot cards for that matter. And there's lots of books that have been written with various spreads. In fact, I've got a book on my bookshelf. I think it has 144 spreads ways that you can place the cards on the table, and each placement has a specific meaning, and then you can apply that meaning to what's happening in your life. Again, like I said earlier, I love a simple, grounded approach.
Yeah.
So the way that I usually work with oracle cards with clients is a 1-card pull, or maybe a 3-card pull. And sometimes we'll take it further and we'll layer different decks on each of these cards so that we can get a deeper, more depth to the information.
Right.
But honestly, the easiest way to use them is just to give them a little bit of a shuffle. And I'm not a poker player, so my shuffling is very basic. And I do that until a card comes into my hand, and it just comes into your hand when you do it that way. This one's called Primordial Heart. And this is actually...
Is that a rock?
It's a rock. It's a huge boulder. It's 4 feet wide and 4 feet long. It's
Wonderful.
only shows at the low tide. And it's covered by a particular kind of seaweed called a bladderwhack. And the bladderwhack is shaped like hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And they're gas filled and jelly filled. And when the tide comes in, they float up. So you can only see this when the tide is low. Right? It's very primal. So that's the primal heart. And so if I were, well, okay, I have pulled it. I was going to say if I were to have, but here I have pulled it. And let's say that I just needed a bit of wisdom. I just needed a hit of wisdom for the day. And I wanted to have something that I could think about throughout the day as a meditation. So this one says, primordial life, primordial love. Everything returns to source. Take whatever hurts your heart holds and give them to the earth's waters. Your wounds will heal. And so from there, I can take that message into my day, and I can think about, wow, do I have any unresolved, unhealed heart hurts that I'm still carrying? Could be from childhood, could be from teenage years, could be from last week when, I don't know, someone didn't hold the door open for me. There's lots of different ways that our heart can hurt. And I can create the intention and work with the intention throughout the day of clearing out what no longer serves my purpose or serves my higher good, that my heart might still be holding from a place of love and gratitude that my heart held it for me in the first place until I was ready to release it. And then I can trust that with that intention stated, the divine or whomever will do that work for me, right? Equally, you could do a 1-card pull before going to bed. And you could think about, how does that message apply to how my day went? Or what could I take from that message into my sleep? And perhaps learn from my dreaming something that my higher self or the divine needs me to know. So that is the simplest way to work with them. And you can do that daily, or you can do it once a week, or however, whatever your mood.
When you feel called, feel called to do so.
Exactly, whatever you're called to do. If we go deeper, the next one that I teach about all of this in the guidebook that comes in the box set as well. The next one is what I call a 3-layered pull. And so that's 3 cards pulled, and each card, so the first card represents mind, second is body, third is soul. First card is past, second card is present moment, third card is the future. First card is the situation. Second card is the solution or the suggestion, the guidance. And the third card is the outcome should the guidance be followed.
So do you then take that into, so first it's the mind, body, and spirit, which I never thought of, right? Which was very interesting. I know the past, the present, the future, right? And then what was the next, like, so in each that, do you ask that question of like, is this something I need to take to my mind? Is it something that is a problem within the mind, or I'm holding it there? And is it something from the past which holds me back from that healing process or that release or that heart
Exactly.
release, I guess? And then what was the third part you said?
So the third part is, so we've got mind, body, and soul. So the soul would be the soul's journey, the life purpose, those bigger questions. Why am I here? What do I need to be doing to be following my path? What does my soul need? It's the past, present, and the future. So when we're looking at the recent past, it's, is there anything that I need to be aware of that's happened recently to me that is impacting me in some way, limiting me in some way, that I need to be made aware of? The present is where I am in this exact moment, which is of course very nebulous because the present is constantly moving into the past. And then the future is guidance around what could be coming towards us, right? And then it's the situation. So you're specific about a particular situation, my relationship with my boss, for example. Then the guidance that's being given by the oracle as to what you could do to shift that relationship or change it in some way. And then the third card is the outcome, the possible outcome, should the guidance be followed, should the person choose to follow the guidance.
Very interesting. I've not heard of it that way before.
Yeah. So it's very deep. We can go very deep with that. And equally, you can do the same spread with 3 decks of cards. So one deck of cards represents mind, body, and soul. And then you layer the next deck of cards and then the next deck of cards. So many creative ways that we can work with these tools.
Amazing. Yeah.
And then if we want to go really deep, one of the things I offer is a 12-month energy reading. It can be 6 months or 12 month. And there we sit down with a bunch of cards, a bunch of decks. The client gets to choose those decks. And we pull a card for each 4-week period from the moment that we're sitting right now. So this would be the beginning of September. So if you and I were doing this, we would start with September and we would pull a card from a deck for September. And we would look at the energy of the message of that card. Then we would do the same thing for October, November, December. We would go all the way along. So basically you end up with a cycle. And each card represents in some way potentially something that is going to show up for you in that month. And now you've been given a little bit of a heads up. And so you can then work with that energy, that message as we've interpreted the message. And
right.
Clients love that one because they do go back to, okay, what was supposed to happen in September? Oh, it did, or worked out that way, or.
But it also helps in setting intention for the month as well, right?
Exactly.
Like if people are journaling and if people are doing their gratitude practice, then having a focus is always helpful, right? It kind of gives us that guideline and steps, because if not, we'll just go off and not be productive about it. And then our mind runs and plays all by itself sometimes. But having that intention, right? Even if you're looking even that 10 months ahead and you go back and you look at May, and then you're like, okay, this is my intention for the month. This is my prayer. This is what do I need to hold on to? Because each of them meant something. And I'm sure you can take that into, like, you need to reflect that is this something that's holding you back? Is this something that's present today? And how am I working on that? And then how am I going to better myself moving forward with the intention and prayer brought for this month? And that it can, because all of it is good intention. All of it is helpful and healing, no matter what month it is, right? So
exactly
makes you a better person anyways.
Well, that's just it. And similarly to picking a card for the day and letting that be your rumination for the day, just like you've stated, you can do that for the whole month. So perhaps September is all about releasing hurts of your heart, and you give yourself the space and time to do that within the structure of the message that you have received for that month. So it's very much a healing journey when we look at it from that perspective.
Amazing. I think it's so nice. And I love how beautiful the pictures are.
Thank
But
you.
the way you word it, because sometimes when I've read the whatever it means, it's just like, it's too much. It's too out there. It's too woo woo, or it's because it depends on which pack it is. But it's interesting how, because it's heart centered, it's easy to understand, or it seems to be easier to understand in the language that you chose, and how that reflects your journey, but then how it really reflects to the person who has the card, what their journey is. So.
Well, that's exactly it, and I really appreciate that, because my intention was when I wrote it was to have it be accessible, and having worked with so many hundreds of oracle card decks over the years, personally, I found some of them to be a little too flowery, and like you say, maybe a little too woo-woo, which works for somebody else, and that's excellent. Yeah. That's why we have so many of them.
Yeah, yeah.
But I wanted my story to be understood in the messages of the cards, and that universal heartbreak and heartache that we encounter when we go through these kinds of major transitions, major upheavals in our lives. Certainly I didn't marry my first husband with the intention to not be married to him for the rest of my life. And so what it takes and what it took to acknowledge that there was too much water under the bridge, that this was not healthy, and how could I do this with the most integrity, and listening to my heart and following my heart so that I was doing it authentically with as little damage as possible. That's not the easiest thing to do. And to be perfectly honest, there was no roadmap for me at the time. I went to lots of bookstores looking for the book that was going to help the woman leaving a 20-year marriage with 2 small children. And that didn't exist then. We're talking 15, 20 years ago now, almost 15 years ago. It didn't exist. It hadn't been written yet. So part of what I wanted this to be was that roadmap, that let it be okay, and also to acknowledge how difficult of a decision that is, and all the things that have to be in place for a woman to leave that relationship, and to do it with integrity, and to do it with everyone's wellness in her heart and in her mind, with the limited supports that can be available. I mean, now I think there's more supports for this sort of decision. But at the time, it's interesting because most of the books that I was finding were about how to heal from being left behind, as opposed to how to step courageously out of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in the sea of books that are available now, it's still hard to find what exactly speaks to your heart, right? What exactly do you need? And it has to be out of a place of love, because I'm sure there's a lot of books that are not from that place, right?
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah,
Probably.
sure.
And what I found so helpful when I was coming out of that marriage was the realization that I wasn't alone. No, I'm not the only person in the entire world who's ever had to go through something like this. And when I finally started to share with friends what I had been living in and living with, because people didn't know. People didn't know. On the surface, they saw something very different in a very different relationship than what was going on behind closed doors, as is often the case. And where I was nervous and I expected backlash and to be told what a horrible person I was for the choices I was making, instead, I found so much love and so much support from new friends, old friends, from family. I was blown away. And so what I wanted to translate into my book, when I wrote the book for the Oracle cards, is that I get it. I'm here for you. You are not alone. And I support what you were doing, because I know how challenging these kinds of choices are. The anguish that we go through when we want to make sure that everybody's okay around us, but we know that our own heart can no longer allow ourselves to be in a situation that's not safe, right?
Right.
And then the feedback, I mean, once it was published and I was shaking with, oh my gosh, here comes the whole, the whole backlash, the whole judgment, the whole everything. I have never received a negative comment, a negative review, at any point in time in the last 10 years since this was published out into the world. I've only ever received people saying, both men and women, thank you. Now I know I'm not alone. And now I know I can do this and I can listen to my heart. And that is so beautiful. And it just validates how important it is that we do A, know that we're not alone, and B, share our stories so that others who have gone through similar things can say to us, it's going to be okay. You're going to get there. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I think it's a wonderful journey. I think it's so incredible with, having that like willingness to take pictures of things, number one, right? Being on the ready always, and being able to recognize or be willing to see, right? Because it's not a matter we always are looking and seeing, but we're not actually seeing what can be present for us, or what signs and symbols are present for us, and how our guides or how God speak to us. All is a little bit different for everybody, but again, it's just this encouragement to understand that you need to listen, you need to pause, you need to be aware of the surroundings, you need to be aware of how the language, your love language is, and there's so much goodness to that. And I love that you actually, and you're right, any of the books that I've ever seen, or the packages that I've ever seen, no one has ever, has said what brought them to this and why they're doing this, rather than it's just they're pumping out cards, let's do this, and it's so amazing that it is part of your journey and it's your life story, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Amazing. So let's pull one more card
Okay.
and then see what it says, because I love the pictures in the story. I can't, yeah, we are going to have where you can get this for sure in the
Yes.
show notes.
Yes.
And then how you can even do your own book, your own session with Megan, because I think it's really fascinating. And I think that we are all still healing from our journeys of, as we age, there's always loss. There's always more loss as we age. And so that leaves us hurt. And I think as women, we've not been taught how to manage our hormonal changes properly, or manage empty nest syndrome properly, or, we always say low libido, but that's just hormonal changes, lack of love, but lack of self-love in that as well. So it all becomes this sense of, we don't know how to express ourselves. We don't know how to take care of ourselves in that sense. And it all circles around love.
Absolutely, it does. And what I've noticed for myself and for friends who are in the same age group as myself, I'm in my mid-50s now, we are finding our voices in ways that we didn't have when we were younger. And that seems to be a natural growth pattern, a natural evolution for many women. And it's I'm blown away, love it when younger women have already found their voices. They are speaking loud and clear, and that is amazing that they are able to do that in their 20s and even in their early teens or their late teens. Whereas I think in our generation, there was less encouragement for that. Certainly I grew up in a family and I grew up in a lovely family and I had a wonderful childhood. But what I learned was that I was to be seen and not heard. I was to answer questions when they were asked of me, but I was not to ask questions of others, right? And that there was a quietness expected of me as a woman. And it took many decades of trial and error, and then finally with leaving that relationship where I'd lost my voice, to re-find my voice and step into that. And every year it gets stronger and stronger. And so for anyone out there who feels like they've been made small, well, you let that happen. I let it happen to me, but I didn't know any better. I didn't know any different, but now I do, right? So I love that the glass card I pulled is this beautiful one here. It's called Unique Heart. this great big beautiful hat. It's about the size of a hand, this rock. I still have it. I took it off the beach. I did ask the beach if I could first. And so in the guidebook, there's my story, and then I share about oracle cards and the different ways to work with them the way that we described. And then each card has its own page. And so you get a much larger picture of the card, and you get the deeper story. So this one is, each heart is unique, each being experiences love differently. Be yourself and love yourself, all else will follow. Who am I to tell you what love should look like? Who is anyone to judge another for the way in which they love? Never mind someone else's happily ever after. What does yours look like? Until you've walked in someone else's shoes, do you really have the right to comment on their love story? This lopsided heart rock represents the uniqueness of each person's experience of the heart. It reminds you to celebrate yourself and your relationships for each unique experience they bring you. Love yourself first, and then invite the validation of that love to your external circumstances, which is so beautiful because it's just what we were saying. It's just what you were saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's incredible. Like,
Thank you.
really amazing, amazing. So usually, I do thank you for spending, we've really spent a lot of time here today, and I'm like, okay, let's go, let's keep talking, but we do have to finish at some point. The, because our communication just flows so naturally. The one thing I love asking at the end of a podcast is, what is a word of wisdom that you share often?
Only one word?
Well, you know what I mean, like something that you really find you lean into. And I know we've shared so much here today, so it's always kind of that question that, like, what did I say? What have I said? But it's always this wonderful, because it is the age of wisdom
Right.
for women in this season. I always ask, what is a word of wisdom that you lean on and you love sharing?
You know what comes up is wisdom and wise. It's what I was saying earlier about how we are so wise, we are so brilliant, and we don't always know that. We don't always acknowledge that. We are wiser than we know. So know it. Know how wise you are. Trust your own wisdom. I have a healer's course called The Confident Healer. And the reason it's called The Confident Healer is because so many healers are not confident. They don't, for whatever reason, they're not confident in what they can do and how they can do it and what their skills are. And in The Confident Healer, it's a 10-month program. And the students learn how to develop that confidence in themselves and their skills and their knowledge and their knowing, and to stop second guessing what their wisdom is telling them. And one of my favorite examples of this is, do you remember the Dr. Mom commercials, the Robitussin cough syrup commercials? And we were celebrated as Dr. Mom, but only when we were giving Robitussin, and how smart we were to know that we should give them Robitussin. Even as a child, I remember seeing that and thinking, wow, but how come women aren't doctors? I mean, when I was little, there were not as many women doctors as there are today. How come the mom is the one who bakes at home, but she's not the chef? How many female chefs are there? Even at a young age, I was seeing that discrepancy and thinking, no, that's not right.
Yeah. I get that told often. I get told that often. It's more of like, you should probably do blah, blah, blah. Oh, you're not a doctor. Like, tell me what to do. I'm like, okay. Just advice, that's all.
But you could lean into Dr. Mom. But I am, because look, Robitussin said I was a doctor.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. So good. Megan, it has been such a pleasure being here with you today and sharing your story and helping us reflect into how important being heart-centered in all aspects of life, mind, body, spirit, health, relationships, everything, right, in our community, and how necessary, like, I can't say this more than I think I've already said, it's so needed. People are not desperate for it, but there's such a need for people to feel loved and have a vehicle to drive their love in, and to be part of a loving community, let alone loving families. And it's just helping people. And this was also one of my goals, is educating women on what's out there and how they can share that with the people who need it the most. And it's how we can come from a loving place and share it with those that we know are in a hurt situation, right? Where their hearts need to be mended, and how incredible and how not easy, because nothing's easy, but how we can pause and reflect and heal ourselves, which is the most difficult thing, but sometimes the most easiest thing. It's people can't really tell you what to do. It has to come from within to really have that change. And it's not about regurgitating trauma, regurgitating,
No.
the hurts out over and over and over again, because that just creates a trauma over again, PTSD, I think, in the mind, and to the soul. So it's just this ability and having the tools like that where we can sit and meditate and pull and have that reflection, right? And really the biggest thing that comes up is, again, like that first card that you pulled in those heart hurts, is like, where am I with forgiveness? Who do I have to understand? Like, how do I have to love differently, or who do I have to forgive, let alone just forgive myself in the different situations, so that my heart is ready for more love and I'm willing to give more love. So it's so good in any of the cards that you've shown today that it's worded so beautifully, and the story behind it is so incredible, where it is a self-reflection tool. So
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And there's something that you said about it's never easy. And I just as we're closing up, I just want to reflect on that for a moment. There's a mantra that I repeat often in my life, which is that I invite ease and cooperation into my day. Because while life isn't always easy and living is not for the faint of heart, we can have ease as we move through these challenging circumstances, when a loved one dies, or our heart's been broken, or we don't have enough money to pay the bills. All of these things are very universal experiences, and they're not easy. But we can ask for ease. We can ask to move through those experiences with ease. And just in the asking, we are given that. In my experience, we are given that. And it seems that once we ask for that ease, our response to circumstances changes. And we
beautiful.
move through it with grace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you, Megan, for sharing that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So I hope everyone enjoyed the podcast today. I thoroughly did. I can't wait to produce it and share it with the world, and just do all of these things. We're going to have all of Megan's information and where you can find her, and her courses and her books and her oracle, and if you want to meet with her, all of that information will be in the show notes. Megan, thank you so much for being part of the Wise Divine Women podcast, helping you to become the wise divine women that you've been called to be. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you.